Okay, we're speaking today with Doug Laney, Data and Analytics Fellow at West Monroe and author of the best-selling book, Infonomics, recognized as a must-read by CIO Magazine. Thanks for being with DMC today, Doug.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Wade, for having me. Good to be with
Uh,
you.
Doug, you've delivered advisory services to hundreds of organizations around the world through your work at Deloitte, Meta Group, Gartner, and now, of course, West Monroe. Infonomics is a term that you coined to describe recognizing and managing organizational data as an asset with tangible value. Your 2017 book, Infonomics, brings your years of research into a form that breaks out three key activities: monetize, manage, and measure.
Mm-hmm.
Can you outline how your book describes these three activities as key points to focus on in order for an organization to formally recognize and manage information as an asset?
Sure. Well, it started back with some organizations who wanted to measure the value of their data actually coming out of after the 9/11 terror attacks. Companies lamented not only, of course, the tragic loss of life, but some of the companies in the Twin Towers lost their data. And so they wanted to understand the value of that data they lost so they could submit insurance claims. Well, as it turns out, the insurers roundly denied those claims, suggesting that data is not a balance sheet asset or not covered by P&C policies. And so that got me to thinking a little bit more about data as property and whether data is an asset. And so anyway, one thing led to another, and beyond thinking about the value of data, I started thinking more about how are organizations driving that value, and that really is the topic of monetization. How are you generating economic benefits from data? But before you get there, you need to manage your data well. You need to have it well organized and clean and complete and integrated and so forth. So that's how they kind of all fit together. There's the old adage, Wade, I'm sure you know, that you can't manage what you don't measure, or you can't manage well what you don't measure well. And for many organizations, kind of my hypothesis has been that, because they're not measuring their data as if it were an asset, right? That they're in a poor position to manage it well, to get the resources or have the support needed to manage it as well as like a traditional asset. And then I think it follows that you can't monetize or you can't generate economic benefits from that which you're not managing well. And so that's kind of how they all fit together. Unfortunately, for many organizations, this tends to be quite a vicious cycle of not measuring, therefore not managing, therefore not monetizing their data as well as they could or should, or as well as they do with their traditional assets. And so the idea behind Infonomics is to kind of reverse that curse and encourage organizations and provide tools and methods for organizations to value their data in different ways, to understand its contribution to a revenue stream or expense savings, or its relevancy across a range of business processes, or its impact on business KPIs, or its cost basis, or market value. So there's a variety of ways to look at value that we do as part of the Infonomics models, and then hopefully that then can drive the improvement in managing data as an actual asset, and then improve the way that you can generate value from it in a variety of ways. So that's kind of the main crux of it.
Thanks. Actually, it's interesting that the genesis of this and your thinking of this was around another crisis. Is we are kind of now in another global crisis as well. So it's interesting. This is quite timely that we're having this interview and our event in data monetization during the global COVID crisis, when many organizations had to go through in what was in many ways a very rapid digital transformation. Doug, I'm really interested in your views on what new and unique opportunities may have surfaced to monetize data due to the changes organizations made so quickly due to the unprecedented COVID crisis, or what advice you may have to maximize value due to the shift.
So I know a lot of organizations have put a kind of a halt to expenditures, but I think in matters of crises like this, data is actually your best defense or even offense. And it really is a mistake for organizations to shut down their analytic initiatives or their data management initiatives. I think that in particular, as other revenue streams may have dried up, your traditional revenue streams, there's always data that you have that is valuable to others. And whether you sell it or package it in different ways, we've identified as part of the Infonomics research and build out that there are a variety of ways to monetize data, not just a single way. Data is what economists would call a non-rivalrous, non-depleting, even regenerative asset. So what that means is that you can and should be monetizing your data in multiple ways simultaneously, but also continuously, because it doesn't deplete when you consume it like other resources do, like physical assets or financial assets will deplete when you consume them. Also, whenever you're using data, you're typically in a position to capture more data about whenever and wherever that data is used. And so it provides basically more fuel. And so that's something that organizations really need to start embracing. And it's really clear that the winning companies in any industry today are those that are much more data savvy. In fact, we found that companies that exhibit certain kinds of data-centric behavior have a market to book value ratio that's nearly 2 times higher than the market average. So there's something that investors recognize about companies that are more serious about their data. The other thing that we've seen is companies starting to collateralize their data. So the airlines in particular, and I wrote about this in Forbes, have identified that the value of the data in their customer loyalty programs is worth more than their business itself. United Airlines, Delta, American Airlines have all collateralized their customer loyalty programs, i.e. their data on customers, to the tune of tens of billions of dollars, whereas like the value of United Airlines and American are only 8 or 9 billion right now. So it's interesting to see that the value of a company's data may be greater than the value of the company itself. The other thing that we see is companies accelerating their moves to digitalize products and services to improve their ability to be consumed remotely and online. And that's somewhat obvious, but the data is a key part in that, to identify what are those business moments that can be capitalized upon and digitalized. Obviously, there's a great need to improve efficiencies right now, to reduce costs, to take cost out of the business. And then the last thing I'll mention is the economic crisis has broken most organizations' forecasts and other models. Typically, models that have relied upon historical data, like a company's own historical data, are broken because that historical data now does not actually reflect the current reality. And so we're working with many organizations to try to convert to help them convert their trend-based models into more driver-based models that take into account leading indicators of business performance, including and especially leading indicators that come from external data sources, macro or other micro data sources. So those are some of the trends I see around data monetization.
Okay, that's fantastic. And I had a third question. Actually, I think we may have covered this already, but we can just summarize quickly.
Oh, go into it, sure.
Yeah, data monetization can be interpreted in many ways. As you said, spawning new streams of revenue, identifying transformational efficiencies in data management,
right,
as well as even spawning new innovative business models. I'm interested within organizations that have a fairly mature data management program, or even those that are not that mature. What specific trends are you seeing? What opportunities are there, in fact, that are not being grasped today?
Even more so than trends, there are certain patterns that have emerged. I've captured over 500 examples of how organizations are using data and analytics in innovative and high value ways over the last several years. And I have this library of examples that I use during the data monetization workshops that I run to help spur ideas and get the creative juices flowing and so forth. But when I have looked across all of these real world examples, it occurred to me that they fall into several kinds of patterns of, we can call it loosely monetization. Anytime you're generating measurable economic benefits, you could refer to that as monetizing data. And so they fall into a number of patterns, but some internal focused, some externally focused. Internally more on improving business performance, improving relationships, developing new products and services, maybe even baking data into existing products and services to make them that much more valuable and useful. And then externally, organizations are more focused on either selling their data through maybe marketplaces that are starting to emerge, or sell it directly to suppliers or manufacturers or others throughout their extended business ecosystem. And then rather than just selling it for cash, a lot of organizations have started to think about bartering with data, exchanging it in return for other kinds of commercial goods or services or favorable commercial terms like payment terms and so forth. And so, it's a great example of leveraging data in a way that kind of, I'm not here to give tax advice, but avoids the tax implications of selling data for cash. And then there's one interesting way that I didn't write about in the book that's come up more recently in light of certain privacy regulations like the GDPR and the California Privacy Act and HIPAA and so forth. And I'm sure other similar regulations there in Canada, where an organization is restricted from exposing, let alone selling, its customer data. And so the inverted data monetization model says, well, let's flip this concept, and rather than me selling you my customer data, I'm going to sell your products and services to my customers, right? And take a cut of that, or a referral fee, or a commission. And in that way, I'm exposing my customers to products and services that may be interesting and useful to them without exposing who they are to the, to the sellers of those products directly. And so that's what we refer to as inverted data monetization. So there are a lot of different ways to monetize data. I would say some other trends that we're starting to see in general related to data management are obviously the move towards self-service analytics, where organizations are trying to embolden and enable all business people to have access to analytics. To see a move toward more proactive, not just reactive data management, anticipating what are going to be the data related needs for an organization rather than waiting for them to kind of queue up. We're also starting to see, and I've long advocated for this, the separation or bifurcation of the IT organization into separate I and T organizations, where information or data and technology are managed separately, managed as separate entities. Once there was a day when it made sense to keep them tightly coupled. Those days are gone. Data and technology, data and software, data and hardware are easily decoupled, and therefore probably should be managed separately. And certainly this enables an organization to manage data as an actual asset, even though the accounting profession hasn't come around to acknowledging it as one, even though it meets the criteria. So those are some of the things that I'm starting to see around data monetization, managing data as an asset, and even measuring it as well. So
fascinating new models is one constant in our industry, certainly, Doug, is innovation. We're seeing new models to actually collaborate and monetize our information. You mentioned that you do data monetization workshops. Of course, you can be reached, I guess, at West Monroe if there's interest in that. And I'd just like to thank you very much on behalf of DMC and our audience for speaking with us today, Doug.
thank you. All right, take care, Wade. Cheers.